Hello and welcome to LA Currents. I'm Anita Bennett. When we hear the words domestic violence, many people think it can't happen to me. Well, it actually happens more often than you think, but there are places you can turn for help. One such place is the East Los Angeles Women's Center here in LA. And joining us now to discuss some of the resources that they have available are Rebecca Melendez, Director of Wellness Programs at the center, and Ruth Rivera. She is the Wellness Center Administrator. Thank you so much for joining us, ladies. So
Thanks for having us.
Definitely. This is an important topic. So let's talk about the services that you offer. How do you help domestic violence survivors?
So the way we help domestic violence survivors is we provide counseling services regardless if they're currently in the situation of domestic violence or if they have a history of it, as well as sexual assault. So a lot of times you have survivors who maybe didn't deal with the problems. They went through life afterwards with sexual assault or human trafficking or domestic violence happening with them. And then, all of a sudden an extra trauma happens to them later on in their life. And then that's when everything comes up. So because of that, we provide services not just for the person going through that situation at the moment, but also with a history of it as well. We have group supports also. We have our outreach component, which a healthcare navigation, especially with HIV and AIDS, and a lot of our youth program with prevention as well.
We also respond immediately after a sexual assault has been reported. We have state-certified advocates.
Who reports it? Or is this coming from the police or?
We have various areas of entry to our program. Sometimes it's the police department that reaches out to us. Sometimes it's the hospital that will notify us that somebody at the medical center has identified as wanting assistance because they are currently in an unhealthy relationship. Sometimes we have the doctors who just have hunches and that person maybe hasn't disclosed, so they'll call us in to do a consult to say, okay, this is what I'm thinking, am I right, am I wrong, how should I proceed? Community members will refer people, and then unfortunately, we've been around for 47 years. Unfortunately, word of mouth is one of our biggest ways of coming into contact with different community members. We have other people who've gone through the process and said, hey, this is where they helped me out. You know, you can reach out to this person that I talked to. And then, of course, our promotoras. They bring a lot of the foot traffic into the organization as well. We work with survivors from that very initial phone call all the way through the court process, all the way through any accompaniments that they may need, and helping secure housing resources or any resources that are lacking at that time. The different challenges, and I know we're going to get into some of this, but the different challenges as to why people stay. What our organization does is try to help an individual overcome those obstacles, right? So that if it's money, okay, these are the resources that are in the community. Is it legal? Okay, this is what's in the community. And so we have advocates that are certified, and we just kind of figure out person by person what their need is.
We're going to talk a little bit more about some of these services. But I have a question. The name of your center is Women's Center. Because men suffer domestic violence as well, do you help any men?
Yes, we do. We all of our services are also available for men that are calling for our system. You know, we understand that this is actually something that's also happening within men. We want to also acknowledge that it does happen a lot more to women. So there are all the resources, sometimes are more for women out there, but men are also victims of domestic violence, sexual assault, and human trafficking as well. So we have a men's healing circle. That's actually, it's wonderful to have, men sitting around together talking about what has happened to them. It's a safe space for them to be able to talk about stuff that are happening to them. We put a lot of pressure onto men as a society to live up to certain standards, certain things, hiding emotions. So a lot of times they're also holding a silence in what's going on with them. We have a fatherhood program also available for not just men who are fathers, but father figures. And we want to talk about things, there's 12 lessons that are done. It's a 12-week program. and it's available for men to talk about what is going on in the family. Well, how do you deal with anger? You know, what about machismo as our Latino culture? Like, what does that
Yes.
look like? So what are the pressures we are putting? How do we channel that into a positive way? And so we have these programs on top of the, normal, therapy services that we provide. These are very niche programs for men as well.
And you said there's a silence with men. Is it, there's a stigma,
Right.
you
Yeah.
mean, right?
Yeah, so, what we know for certain is that the way that society is set up, the ability for a man to step forward and say, I'm being harmed by a woman, isn't something that is generally encouraged by our society. People look at those type of men as being weak or as incapable of meeting the level of masculinity that's portrayed throughout sports, throughout just different messaging that comes from media, from music, from films, from, all just from our community, from our cultural traditions. And so those are some of the reasons why men don't feel like they are able to speak up. But what we know for certain is that they do. And now that we've begun to provide a platform and a space for men to express themselves and heal themselves, we've really encountered some incredible stories of individuals on how it is that they're learning how to heal. One of the more intentional efforts that we've made in the last several years is to include young men into our youth programming. We have a youth empowerment program, which is very different. It's not a reactive or healing program. It's literally an education, prevention, and empowerment model. And the young ladies were sitting there going, okay, you guys can teach us all we want. They really did challenge us because they were like, you can teach us all we want, but we're not the ones. The men need to hear, the guys need to hear this messaging too. And so we said, okay, we'll bring in some of your friends, and that started the conversation.
Okay.
Exactly. And so that was probably about 7-8 years ago. And since then, we have made a conscious effort of being able to include young men in the prevention and education portion of this. The key to the work that we're doing with men is that it is other men doing the work. It is not women moving into a man's space telling them, because
I understand. So it's men
doing the work
working
within the
with the
organization,
men.
right? So we've trained the men on our work so that they can do the work within themselves and in their circles. The same way that as women, oftentimes we don't want men telling us what to do.
I get it. Let's talk about the numbers, because women are, I shouldn't say victim, correct?
Yeah.
Survivors. Women are much more often survivors, correct?
Right.
Yeah. Predominantly, we see that, 1 in 4 women are facing this. Statistically, sometimes it says 1 in 2 women, depending on what you're looking. Is it the physical, is it domestic violence? Is it sexual assault and domestic violence? So a lot of them kind of intersect. So when you start looking at statistics, it's usually 1 in 3 women, 1 in 2 women. And so we see that the numbers are a lot higher with men. It's 1 in 7, 1 in 6. The other part of it is usually statistics tend to be about 3 years back.
Oh.
So that's another problem that we see when we're trying to gather these numbers, is that by the time we're already in 2023 and 2020 was going on, those numbers are probably higher at that point. And men are underreporting, so also that number goes, is mismatched as well. But with Latinas specifically, we see that 1 in 3 are the ones that are affected with this, have seen some sort of domestic violence or victimization in their lifetime. So for us, it's really important to be going out to the community and engaging and letting them know the different aspects of domestic violence as well.
What we know for sure is that those numbers are underreported. Through our work, every day we meet individuals who say, I suffered a lifetime and never told anybody. So these numbers are official numbers that come through the different institutions, right? But they're not, I don't know that they're so much reflective of what the community really looks like. I truly believe that those numbers, just based on our own experience, are much higher than what.
I would like to add
Higher than 1 in 3?
Yeah,
Right.
I would like to add the fact that a lot of, especially, working within our communities that we work with, the systems that are out there sometimes are not the ones that our community goes forthcoming and telling them their story. So most of the times it's outside of that system. So we're not quantifying the numbers there. You're talking about, a friend telling another friend, for us in Spanish is a comadre talking to another comadre about what is going on. Those numbers are not going to reflect when you look at actual statistics and being tallied. So that is the reason why, we're seeing that these numbers are a lot more higher than anything else is probably seeing in the picture. And that's kind of heartbreaking because already you're seeing 1 in 3.
Right. Yeah.
And it's really sad. And it takes about 6 to 7 times for a person even to leave. And that's just what's been also statistically seen. Sometimes it's a lot higher or, because of the way sometimes the story ends at the end.
You say our community, do you mean Latinas?
Yes, well, Boyle Heights and East LA, primarily Latinas, but we service all communities that live within those vicinity. We have, those are the areas that we focus our services on, but primarily because of the history that is set within our organization, the Latino community is the one that we go forth with all of our services.
And you offer services in English and Spanish?
Yes.
Right. Everything that we do in Spanish is mimicked in English and vice versa. We work with 30 different communities running from Boyle Heights all through what we call SELA, Southeast Los Angeles. And each year we're very blessed and never take for granted the fact that we work with about 12,000 individuals in our community.
A year?
In the various different capacities that we offer. That's across the board. And again, that's an element of trust. That's an element of people knowing that we're there and that we're going to do right by them and what they need. But going back to your original question, our community, the Latino community, specifically the immigrant community, doesn't often go to the various institutions and say, this is what's happening to me. And so that's part of our work and part of our ability is because we have trust with different institutions, we can be the buffer between what it is that the survivor needs and what it is that the system needs in order for them to heal or get to the next step or take care of whatever it is they need to take care of.
You both focus on wellness. What does that mean for a survivor? Wellness.
Wellness for a survivor could be something as simple as food security.
Right.
It could be shelter. It could look like health. One of the things that Rebecca and I work out of the medical campus, the LA General Medical Center. So a lot of the intersections that we see is domestic violence and healthcare. So we see how health is impacted because of domestic violence. So you see the factor that maybe chronic illnesses that are happening, manifesting later on in life, like diabetes, high blood pressure, goes back to that domestic violence, a history of it, them living in high stress level situations and you're on survivor mode every single day of your life. So that is one of the things that, we see as wellness. We also see as a cultural healing, also a holistic approach that we have. So it's not just the, either a spa day, shopping day, or whatever wellness for each one of us looks like. It literally is a component of it. And so part of the job that we do as a East Los Angeles Women's Center is looking at a very holistic approach, trying to pinpoint what is the need. So we tailor make it to whatever their wellness path and their healing journey looks like.
Okay. Thank you, Ruth, for coming here. And you are going to leave us now. Rebecca, you will stick around. And we'll be right back to talk about community outreach for survivors. Welcome back. Now we are continuing our conversation on domestic violence and ways the East Los Angeles Women's Center can help. Once again, Rebecca Melendez, Director of Wellness Programs at the center, is here. And now joining us is Jazmin Flores. You are the center's lead promotora or community outreach person. All right, so how does community outreach work when you're dealing with survivors?
My work is more in the community, like provide resources and information and education on awareness of domestic violence and sexual assault. So we're in charge of provide resources, workshops in different places like schools, parent centers, faith organizations, everywhere they open a space for us to provide more, bring awareness to our community, especially Latino, Spanish-speaking community.
When you're out, does anyone ever come up to you and say, I need help?
99 of the time, we have a survivor in every place we go.
You wanted to add something?
Yeah, you know, it's incredible. And that's the reason why it's so important that every single person who works at our organization goes through, we have a 72-hour training. And whether you're a volunteer or you're a staff person, every single person from the time you walk in the door all the way through the organization, you're going to find that we're called advocates, and we all have state certifications on crisis intervention, because what happens is the second somebody figures out what it is that we do, or that we are an advocate, or that we have resources or information that's going to help them or a family member, they disclose. You know, and on our end, we need to be sure that the advocates that are out in the community are prepared and have the ability to provide the answers and resources or support. And not only that, when we schedule events that we know are going to be triggering, we always have therapists present, because we know there's going to be somebody in the audience that's going to need some reassurance, you know, some words of encouragement or immediate services at that point. So yes.
Either one of you can answer this. What's one of the most harrowing stories that you've heard in your work?
For me, some of the most difficult stories are always when people are pregnant. And they come to us for assistance. We had a woman, we have a domestic violence shelter. It's actually one of a kind on a county campus. It's the Hope and Heart Shelter, and it's the first that is geared towards domestic violence, sexual assault, and human trafficking survivors. But because it's at Los Angeles General Medical Center, we get referrals directly from the medical center, and our organization runs it. We're very lucky that the administrator, Jorge Orozco, and his incredible team is so supportive of all of our work. But because we're there, we get some of the harder cases, and the pregnancy cases, I think, are the ones that always are very difficult for me. We always say that since the shelter opened, we've had 8 babies born into safety, because they're literally at the shelter, you know, ready to give birth. And I don't know that that is ever what a person imagines is going to be the scenario, but our staff does their best to make this, you know, the situation most comfortable. Seniors is always hard as well. You know, sometimes everybody thinks that the harder cases are the most physically obvious cases, where there's blood or there's bruising, but to watch the aftermath of domestic violence unfold emotionally through the eyes of somebody, exactly, to watch a person live through that is so difficult. But the beauty of our work is seeing the other end of it, right? Where we see the moms with their babies move on to safety, where we see the elderly people finally find the peace that they've been searching for, or break the cycle, where we see individuals come back years later or run into us and say, you helped us and now we're here. And so yes, it's all tragic, but there's so much beauty in the human spirit ability to heal that I think if you ask any one of us, that's what keeps us going. You know, that's why we do it.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
How closely do you work with the LAPD?
Very close. Yeah, very close. We have to. You know, part of the process, if a survivor chooses to go through the legal process and they choose to make a report, then we're going to stand behind them. That means, like I mentioned earlier, that oftentimes we are the buffers between the system and the survivor. And regardless of what the what the survivor may or may not need, the LAPD needs a lot from them. And so sometimes we are the in-between people explaining to the survivor, okay, this is why they're asking you this. And then we go back to the LAPD, okay, this is why she or he is reacting like this, you know. But more importantly, they are partners in our work. You know, they are very, our division, the Hollenbach division, each year comes to our office, and we, the children that are in shelter, their officers sponsor the kids that are in shelter, and they come in and they bring us toys for Pumpkin Day, for Halloween. They just came with armloads of pumpkins and pizza and all kinds of stuff to paint pumpkins. So it's not always centered around the crisis. Sometimes it's just community building. And then Jazmin, I know, go ahead.
And for the outreach component, we also have a very close relationship with the police officers. We part of a lot of community council meetings, so we work together with other organizations to see how can we work together to provide more services to the community.
Do you ever ask about immigration status?
The only time that it comes up is when a survivor is in the process of trying to get legal documentation in place, or when the person who has been caused harm through their immigration journey. We've had a couple of people who have come to us who have been harmed in detention centers. That's true.
Immigrant detention centers.
Yes, correct. But is it a requirement to receive assistance at our organization? Absolutely not. The beauty of our organization is that you're always going to find someone that looks like you, someone that speaks like you. If you're monolingual Spanish speaking, you're going to have a monolingual Spanish person assigned to work with you. If you only speak English, if you're zero generation, right? If your family has always been in the United States, but you're still in East Los Angeles, and you're going to have somebody in our organization that represents the community. As a matter of fact, a very large portion of our staff is connected to the community. We are all rooted there one way or another through our families, or we live there now, or we grew up there, or whatever it is. So we're very lucky that in terms of the services that we offer, they're not contingent on a person's immigration status.
Can I add a little bit of that? Immigration is like the biggest issue why a person doesn't request services.
Oh, right.
Because they are afraid.
They
are afraid for
that they'll be
immigration.
reported.
Yes, they are afraid of the police. They are afraid of social services because they think if they report domestic violence, sexual assault, or any kind of violence, the child are going to remove away.
It also comes up, thank you for reminding me, it also comes up when we are speaking to survivors. That's one of the reasons why they don't leave, because the person perhaps that is causing them harm is dangling that over their heads, right? If you leave me, I'm going to call INS, or I'm going to call ICE, or I'm going to call whoever. And so that's why I said as part of the legal process, they're like, I can't leave him because he's going to report me. And so we're like, no, we have a lot of community partners who are well-versed in this type of scenario, and they can help you figure out what your options are, but that is not the reason to not leave someone, so yes.
And that's where the promotoras go with information and provide education. And domestic violence is a crime, so they can be like under the BOCA, the victims of crime. Victims of crimes, and they can fix their immigration status in this. Because they in the violent relationship.
What about, we've talked about Latinas, what about the LGBTQ community? Do you see that?
Yeah, I feel like we keep saying we're the first this or we're the first that. But, one of the things that our organization, the legacy of the women that built our organization is so powerful. And one of the things that I'm always so proud of is when the AIDS epidemic hit in the United States in the mid-'80s, our organization never turned their back on our community. Instead, what they did was they branched out. That was the second core service that was developed at the organization. It was first sexual assault, and then our services to individuals that were impacted by HIV and AIDS, and then finally domestic violence was the last one. But because of the services that we began offering in the 80s when people were turning their back, I mean, just on the LGBT community as a whole, and then imagine being Latino, and then imagine being ostracized by that community. Like it was, a ripple effect. And so since the 80s, we've always had a great relationship with the LGBTQ plus community, and we lean a lot on our community partners to be able to provide additional resources that might be necessary. But yes, we do have resources available. And, the need of a survivor isn't attached to a label. You can't look at a survivor from the perspective of they're from here or they're from there. Empathy doesn't come attached to anything. You know, when it's we because of the shelter, we come across individuals who are from Africa, who are from Europe, who are from all over the world, and we're in Los Angeles. We're a melting pot, you know, and sometimes we know the language, sometimes we don't. We have different sister organizations throughout the county that do this work who also specialize, for example, the Center for Pacific Asian Family. You know, when we're like, okay, we don't speak they have an incredible reach of languages, but we don't speak I think it's over 100 languages that they speak. We call them and we're like, okay, help us out, and vice versa, right? They call us and say, hey, we need help with this, and so that's how we move around. But thankfully, we're able to figure it out always.
I just want to ask you very briefly, did you see a spike in services that were needed during the pandemic?
100%. Yes. I can tell you from the direct services perspective, and then Jazmin can tell you the community portion of it, but I can tell you that Mayor Garcetti was huge in helping us resolve the need that we had, because if we talk about domestic violence as a problem now, imagine during the pandemic with the stay-at-home orders, people were enclosed without any option or resources to leave with the person who was causing them harm, and they were stuck indoors without any help. Well, we talk about the history of the organization. A lot of people knew that this was the time that they needed to reach out to us, right? Domestic violence was a whole different type of epidemic. It was an epidemic during the epidemic. And so Mayor Garcetti was able to provide us funds to open an emergency shelter at a hotel here in Los Angeles. And in under 2 weeks, we housed 46 families that were fleeing, actively fleeing. And we carried that caseload all the way through the pandemic.
If someone is watching and they are in a situation, what can they do? Where can they go?
What I can say that please understand that they're not alone. There's a lot of resources, a lot of organizations like ours that they can provide information, resources. It depends on the case, but please call us. They can call us at our hotline number 24/7. We have a bilingual line, so please, they're not alone.
We have a chat line as well.
We also have a chat line. Yes.
You can walk into the center. You can walk, if you're anywhere near LA General, you can walk into our offices at the Wellness Center or to the emergency department. Just request to speak to an advocate. Somebody there will call us. We have people that just walk into the center all the time saying this is, you know, if you're anywhere near ELAC, if you're, you know, there's a lot of, if you run into a promotora, there's a lot of points of entry. Ask around. Everybody knows how to find us.
The promotoras are everywhere.
Yes. So we talked a little bit about you being a promotora. What does that mean? And for our Spanish-speaking community, ¿qué haces como una promotora?
Okay, una promotora es un miembro de la comunidad que ha tomado un entrenamiento. Nosotros recibimos fondos federales del Departamento de Justicia para traer educación a nuestra comunidad. Entonces tenemos el Instituto de Promotoras que educa a mujeres de la comunidad en un entrenamiento de 6 semanas donde les hablamos cuáles son esas cosas básicas de cómo identificar una relación
semanas
abusiva.
de educación.
Educación. Y les certificamos a estas mujeres para que ellas vayan a sus comunidades y puedan traer información, recursos, que puedan comunicarse con otras mujeres que hablan su mismo idioma, que tal vez vivan en la misma comunidad y que puedan hablar sobre los servicios que nosotros ofrecemos. Consejería, terapia, grupos de apoyo, estamos en ferias comunitarias, estamos en diferentes eventos y más que nada también conociendo nuestra propia cultura, nuestra propia comunidad y sabiendo todos los mitos culturales que hay afuera. Nuestro trabajo es romper esos mitos culturales que muchas veces normalizamos muchas cosas de la violencia en nuestras familias.
Y cuando estás en la comunidad, ¿cuántos de las gentes, cuántas de las personas solamente hablan español?
El 80% de nuestra comunidad que nosotros servimos hablan español.
So 80% of the women you deal with
yes.
only
The areas
speak
where we
Spanish.
serve, yes, they speak Spanish.
This has been so informative. I'm really glad that we, are able to tell people that help is available. Thank you, Rebecca Melendez, Jazmin Flores, and Ruth Rivera, who was here earlier, of the East Los Angeles Women's Center. Thank you so much for being
Anytime.
Thank you
here.
for having us.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
And that is going to do it for this edition of LA Currents. I'm Anita Bennett. Thank you for watching.